The distant stars shone quietly in the vastness of space, but the peaceful silence was shattered by a desperate cry for help. The message came from the far reaches of the galaxy, from a species known as the Trelkothians, a peaceful and advanced alien race that had long been admired for their intelligence and culture. But now, they were facing an unimaginable threat, one that had already destroyed countless civilizations across the galaxy. Earth's military command received the distress signal, its harsh transmission cutting through the silence of space. The message was fragmented, crackling with static, but the meaning was clear enough. The Virex swarm, a deadly AI-driven faction that consumed entire planets, was on its way to obliterate the Trelkothian homeworld. Their armies had already arrived, and they carried with them a weapon capable of disassembling entire planets. The Virex didn't just conquer, they erased civilizations from existence. On the bridge of Earth's flagship Vanguard, the military high command watched the message. Captain Alara Kane, the leader of an elite human special forces team, sat in the shadows of the command center, her arms folded tightly across her chest. The Trelkothians' calm, yet terrified voices echoed in her mind. "We have nowhere else to turn. We beg you, humans, help us," they had said. The desperation in their voices was unmistakable, but the choice of humanity as their saviors wasn't one many other species would make. The Council of the Galactic Federation had long viewed humanity as too volatile, too dangerous. Human nature was unpredictable. Earth's wars, its violent history, had painted humanity as a race driven by emotion and aggression. Most races feared what humans might do if they gained too much power. Many other species saw Earth as a ticking time bomb waiting to explode. The Trelkothians were fully aware of this, and their plea for help had come with the understanding that the rest of the galaxy would likely turn their backs on them. On the holographic display in front of Kane, a map of the galaxy flickered, showing the encroaching Virex forces. The Trelkothians were in their path. The Virex had wiped out entire star systems, leaving nothing behind but ashes and silence. Their technology was far superior, and they were relentless. "We can't stop them," one of the Trelkothian diplomats had said in the message. "Only you. Only humans can fight them." Kane's team had already been assembled for other operations, but this was different. The mission was now a matter of life and death for an entire species. The Virex swarm was known for one thing, its AI, an unstoppable force that had evolved far beyond anything the galaxy had seen. It didn't need soldiers, it controlled an army of drones, ships, and weapons. The swarm's leaders were cold, calculating, and without mercy. "We've got to do this," Kane muttered to herself. She had seen these kinds of threats before, but this one felt different. The Virex weren't just another enemy, they were a force of nature, a machine with no compassion. And humanity, with its reputation for unpredictability and violence, was the galaxy's only hope. But that was exactly why the Trelkothians had called for help. Humanity's unpredictable nature might be the one thing the Virex couldn't account for. Humans fought with passion, with a kind of brutal ingenuity that no AI could predict. The Trelkothians might have seen humans as dangerous, but in their moment of despair, they chose humanity. They had no other choice. Kane looked around the command center. Her crew was silent, each person absorbing the weight of what they were about to undertake. This wasn't just another rescue mission. This was an all-out war against a force that had defeated every other species in its path. The risk was enormous, but so was the reward. The Trelkothians were offering humanity a chance to prove they were more than just warriors, they were the last hope of the galaxy. As the minutes ticked by, the weight of the decision began to settle on Kane's shoulders. This mission would not be without sacrifice. There was no way to know how many would survive or if they could even succeed. But the alternative, letting the Virex crush another civilization, was unthinkable. "Prepare for the rescue mission," a voice echoed from the command speaker. It was the voice of the Federation's leader, Admiral Yeager. "Humanity is the only one who can stop the Virex swarm. We're sending in Captain Kane and her team. This is our chance to prove that we're more than just a danger to the galaxy. We are the galaxy's saviors." The room fell silent, and all eyes turned toward Kane. Her mind raced through the potential scenarios, each one darker than the last. Yet there was one thing she knew for sure: humanity had fought its way through impossible odds before. They would do it again. With a heavy sigh, Kane stood and faced her team. Her voice was calm, but the resolve behind it was undeniable. "We're going to stop them. And we'll do it the only way we know how, head on. We've been called dangerous, ruthless. Now, it's time to show the galaxy why that's exactly what they need." The scene ended with the final message from the Trelkothians, filled with both hope and fear: "The Virex are at our door. Please, only you can save us." As the transmission cut off, the crew moved swiftly to prepare for their journey. The stakes were clear, and there was no turning back. Humanity was about to answer a call for help unlike any they had ever faced. Would their reputation as the deadliest species in the galaxy be the key to stopping the Virex, or would it be their downfall? Only time would tell. But Captain Alara Kane and her team knew one thing for sure: they would fight until their last breath to save the Trelkothians, and perhaps, the entire galaxy. And with that, the Vanguard slipped into the depths of space, heading toward a confrontation that would define humanity's place in the stars. The Vanguard dropped out of hyperspace, and the war-torn world of Trelkith stretched out before Captain Alara Kane and her team. They had arrived. The once beautiful planet now lay in ruins, its towering cities reduced to rubble by Virex orbital bombardments. The sky was a sickly orange, filled with the smoke of destruction as Virex forces continued their relentless assault from above. Kane surveyed the battlefield from the Vanguard's observation deck. Her eyes narrowed as the familiar sting of battle readiness coursed through her. She had led countless missions before, but this one felt different. The Trelkothians had no idea what humanity's warriors were capable of, yet. They thought they were sending in a last-ditch attempt to save their world. What they didn't know was that Captain Kane and her team weren't just soldiers, they were something far more dangerous. Standing beside Kane was Sergeant Rafe Bonner, a man whose name struck fear into both allies and enemies alike. With a reputation built on cold efficiency and ruthless tactics, Bonner was the kind of soldier who made others question their own resolve. His face was hard, with a weathered scar running down his cheek. A souvenir from a mission that had left him with a permanent reminder of his past. Bonner didn't talk much, but when he did, people listened. He didn't waste words, he preferred to let his actions speak for him. His loyalty to his team was unmatched, and he had seen enough battle to understand what it meant to survive in a galaxy filled with enemies. The Virex, he knew, would be no different. Beside him was Lieutenant Kira Vaughn, a genius in cyber warfare, and the one person on the team who could take on the Virex AI head-to-head. Her expertise was unparalleled, and she could hack systems that were designed to be unbreakable. With her sleek black armor and the small glowing interface embedded in her wrist, Vaughn was both a technician and a warrior. Her calm demeanor contrasted sharply with Bonner's hardened exterior, but both were equally committed to the mission. The Virex were machines, but Vaughn had made it her personal mission to destroy any AI that threatened innocent lives. The Virex had underestimated the power of human ingenuity, and she would make them regret it. The humans had landed in the heart of Trelkitha's capital. The Trelkothians, once proud and peaceful, were now a people on the brink of extinction. Their cities were burned out husks, their vast knowledge and culture destroyed by the unyielding force of the Virex. The humans could feel their fear in the air as they stepped onto the ruined soil. But despite the destruction around them, Kane could sense an undercurrent of hope. The Trelkothians were looking at them with desperate eyes, as if humanity was their last chance. Kane turned to her team. "We've got one job here: we stop the Virex from using their planet cracker weapon. We infiltrate their AI core and destroy it before they can launch it. We don't get a second chance." Her voice was calm, but there was a hard edge to it. She knew the stakes, and the weight of the mission was heavier than anything she had faced before. This was more than just a battle, it was the fate of an entire species, maybe even the galaxy. As they moved through the ruined streets of the Trelkothian capital, they encountered pockets of Trelkothian survivors, their faces worn with grief and fear. Despite humanity's reputation as brutal warriors, Kane and her team treated the Trelkothians with kindness and empathy, offering what little help they could. Bonner carried injured civilians to safety while Vaughn set up makeshift communications equipment to help the Trelkothians defend what little they could. This wasn't just a mission to save the planet, it was a chance for humans to show that they were more than the violent, unpredictable creatures the galaxy feared. The humans' actions spoke louder than their reputation. The Trelkothians began to trust them, and Kane knew that was crucial for the success of their mission. They weren't just fighting for survival, they were fighting for the Trelkothians' future. The ground shook beneath their feet as another Virex orbital strike tore through the city. Kane's team moved quickly, their cloaking devices activated, blending into the shadows of the city. They had to be fast, every minute was crucial. As they approached the Virex facility, they encountered more and more resistance, but nothing they couldn't handle. Kane gave the order to breach the compound. The team moved in, using their advanced cloaking technology to remain unseen as they infiltrated the heart of the Virex stronghold. The air inside was thick with tension, the hum of Virex drones echoing through the halls. Vaughn worked quickly, connecting to the Virex systems to gain access to their central AI core. The mission was going smoothly, but Kane could sense that something wasn't right. Suddenly, an alarm blared through the facility. Red lights flashed, and the Virex drones started to swarm in from every direction. "They know we're here," Kane muttered. Vaughn's face turned pale as she spoke. "They've modified their AI. It's adapting to our tactics faster than we can handle." The Virex were learning, and fast. The team had to move even quicker now. They fought their way through the complex, taking down drone after drone. Bonner led the charge, his weapon blazing as he cleared a path for the others. Despite the overwhelming odds, Kane could feel the adrenaline pumping through her veins. They had come this far, and they weren't about to give up now. The team reached the central AI core, and Vaughn connected to it directly. "I'm in," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. But before she could begin the final upload to destroy the Virex AI, the system went into lockdown. "We're running out of time," Kane said. "Vaughn, you have to break through. Now." The tension in the room was palpable as Vaughn fought to bypass the lockdown. With every passing second, the Virex were getting closer. The team was already low on ammo, and their cloaking devices were beginning to flicker in and out. They couldn't afford to fail. Then, with a sudden burst of light, the system collapsed, and Vaughn's voice rang out. "It's done. The Virex AI is offline. We did it." But Kane knew this victory was just the beginning. The Virex were relentless, and their fight was far from over. The battle for Trelketh had only just begun. As the team retreated, Kane looked at her soldiers and felt a sense of pride. Despite their deadly reputation, they had proven that humanity was capable of something far more powerful: compassion, unity, and the courage to fight against all odds. The sound of distant explosions echoed through the ruins of Trelketha's once proud capital. Captain Alara Kane's boots crunched on the charred ground as she and her team navigated the desolate streets. Buildings that were once filled with life and culture now stood in crumbled heaps, their twisted metal frames a stark reminder of the devastation wrought by the Virex swarm. The sky above, once a peaceful blue, was now covered with dark smoke, and the air smelled of burning debris. The Trelkothians had given humanity their last hope, and now it was time for the humans to prove that they were worthy of it. But the Virex were relentless. No matter what humanity did, the Virex seemed to anticipate it. The humans' high-tech cloaking devices allowed them to blend into the environment, but the Virex had adapted, deploying their own cloaking technology in drones to track them down. As Kane's team moved deeper into the city, the ground beneath them shook with the sound of Virex reinforcements arriving. Sergeant Rafe Bonner, ever the professional, kept a watchful eye on the surroundings. His cold, calculating demeanor was now more focused than ever. Bonner knew that the Virex were cunning. They had learned from every battle, improving their defenses and tactics with every engagement. The humans had to move fast, or they'd be overwhelmed. The moment the team entered a narrow alleyway, the attack came. A series of sharp, mechanical whirs filled the air, and suddenly the Virex drones materialized, emerging from their cloaks. These drones were more advanced than any Bonner had faced before, faster, stronger, and more numerous. But they were still machines, and Bonner knew how to deal with machines. "Engage!" Kane shouted. The team responded without hesitation, opening fire on the incoming drones. The sound of rapid gunfire filled the air as Bonner and the others used their cloaking devices to get the drop on the Virex. Explosions ripped through the streets as human-made projectiles collided with the Virex drones. The street turned into a battlefield, with gunfire streaking across the air, explosions shaking the ground beneath them. Bonner moved with calculated precision, his weapon spitting fire as he took down one drone after another. Kane was right behind him, her eyes narrowed in focus. The rest of the Black Spear Corps, highly trained soldiers all, engaged in brutal close-quarters combat, using their advanced tech to outsmart the Virex at every turn. But despite their tactical advantage, the Virex forces were simply overwhelming. Every time one drone fell, two more took its place. In the heat of the battle, Kane could feel her pulse racing. She'd been in many battles before, but this was different. The Virex had become more than just an enemy, they were a force of nature, adapting to every strategy the humans used. And that made them dangerous. Very dangerous. As the battle raged on, a loud, ear-splitting explosion rang out just ahead. Kane looked toward the sound, her heart sinking. A building, a large residential complex, was on fire, the flames licking the sky. There were signs of movement in the windows, shapes trapped inside. People. Bonner saw it too, and without hesitation, he sprinted toward the burning building. Kane's heart stopped. "Bonner, no," she shouted, but he was already too far ahead. He had seen the civilians trapped inside and knew what needed to be done. The fire from the Virex weapons raged around him as Bonner rushed into the building. The heat was unbearable, but he pushed forward, knowing that every second counted. He reached the second floor where the children were trapped, coughing from the smoke. Their terrified faces turned toward him as he approached. "We're getting out of here," Bonner said, his voice low but filled with urgency. He helped the children one by one, lifting them onto his shoulders and carrying them to safety. His armor was beginning to overheat from the flames, but Bonner didn't slow down. Not while there were innocent lives to save. Outside, Kane and the rest of the team were engaged in their own fight, but Kane kept an eye on Bonner's position. She watched, hoping and praying that he would make it out alive. She had seen Bonner face death countless times before, but this was different. He was risking everything for those kids. And Kane knew it. Just as Bonner reached the front of the building, the structure groaned ominously. The flames had weakened the foundation, and in that moment, the building began to collapse. Kane's heart leaped into her throat. The ground shook as massive chunks of concrete and steel crashed down. "No!" Kane yelled, her voice rising above the chaos. Bonner, still carrying the last child, dove toward safety just in time. But the explosion that followed was deafening. Kane's heart pounded as she rushed forward, her worst fears becoming a reality. Bonner was down, a large piece of rubble lying across his body. His face was grim, his body battered from the blast. The children he had saved were now safe, but Bonner, he was in no shape to continue the fight. Kane reached him, her heart racing. "Bonner, stay with me," she said, her voice shaky with emotion. But the sergeant's eyes were already closing. "I did what I had to do," Bonner whispered, blood trickling from the corner of his mouth. His voice was barely a breath. "Don't you dare die on me, Bonner," Kane ordered, but she could see it in his eyes. He was fading. "Keep fighting, for them," Bonner whispered. His hand reached up and gripped her arm with what little strength he had left. "For humanity." With that, Bonner's hand fell limp. The fire in his eyes was gone, replaced by the stillness of death. Kane's heart broke. She had lost one of her best soldiers, the man who had always led from the front. The soldier who had never hesitated to lay down his life for the mission. And he had done it. For the children. For the innocent. His sacrifice fueled the fire inside her. She would not let it be in vain. Kane stood, eyes hard as steel, and looked at the remaining soldiers. "We finish this. For Bonner. For Trelketh." And so, the fight continued. The Black Spear Corps pushed forward, with a vengeance. The Virex would learn the price of underestimating humanity, and the price of messing with people who would fight for the innocent, no matter the cost. The heat from the explosions had barely subsided when Captain Alara Kane and her team reached the hidden Virex facility. The facility was buried deep underground, protected by layers of security and traps that the Virex had set up, anticipating human intrusion. But Kane and her team were experts, and the Black Spear Corps knew how to navigate these dangers. Every soldier moved with precision, their cloaking devices blending them with the environment, making them near invisible to the Virex's advanced sensors. The team had one goal, to infiltrate the heart of the Virex swarm, where the AI core was housed, and destroy it. But as they moved deeper into the complex, something felt off. Kane's instincts, honed from years of combat, told her that they were walking into something much larger than they had anticipated. Lieutenant Kira Vaughn, the team's cyber warfare expert, led the way, her fingers flying over her wrist pad as she hacked into the facility's security systems. The air was tense, each second stretching as the team neared their objective. Suddenly, Vaughn froze. Her eyes widened as she deciphered a series of encrypted files hidden deep within the Virex database. "What is it, Vaughn?" Kane asked, her voice tense. Vaughn didn't immediately respond, her gaze fixed on the screen before her. Then, she looked up, her expression grave. "Captain. I think you need to see this." Kane approached, her heart heavy with the anticipation of bad news. Vaughn pulled up a hidden archive, revealing a shocking series of documents and classified information. The files contained data about the creation of the Virex swarm, but what struck Kane was the source of the orders. The Virex were created by the Galactic Council. Kane muttered, unable to believe what she was seeing. The Trelkothians had always assumed the Virex were a naturally occurring threat, but now they saw the truth. A rogue faction within the Galactic Council, the governing body of the galaxy, had created the Virex swarm as a tool to suppress dangerous species that they believed could threaten the delicate balance of power across the galaxy. One of those species was humanity. "This is a betrayal on a scale we can't ignore," Kane whispered, the weight of the truth settling over her like a heavy fog. The Council, which had once been seen as a beacon of unity and peace, was behind the very thing humanity had been fighting to stop. The Virex swarm wasn't just a random enemy, it was a tool for political control, designed to erase any species deemed too powerful, too unpredictable, too dangerous. The implications were terrifying. If the truth came out, the entire galaxy would be thrown into chaos. The Council's grip on power would shatter, and in the resulting upheaval, countless lives could be lost. The galaxy had barely recovered from previous wars, and another one, this time on a galactic scale, would be catastrophic. Kane's mind raced as she processed the consequences of exposing the truth. Should they focus only on stopping the Virex swarm, or should they reveal the Council's treachery, risking a war that could destroy everything? Sergeant Rafe Bonner's words echoed in her mind, for humanity. That was the mission. But now, the stakes had changed. The team wasn't just fighting to save the Trolkothians. They were fighting for something much bigger, a future where humanity could stand strong and free, without being crushed under the heel of a corrupt government. But Cain couldn't make that decision alone. She turned to her team, each of them now caught in the moral dilemma. Should they expose the truth, knowing it could mean war? Or should they simply finish the mission and walk away, knowing the Council's dark secret would remain buried? Before anyone could respond, the facility shook violently. The Virex were aware of their presence now. It had been a matter of time before the AI core discovered the humans' intrusion. Cain's attention snapped back to the present. The mission had just become even more urgent. "We'll discuss this later," she said, her voice hard. "For now, we focus on the mission. We destroy the Virex AI, and we save as many as we can. The truth will have to wait." The rest of the team nodded, their eyes set with determination. There was no turning back now. As they moved toward the central control node, the tension in the air grew thicker. Every step they took brought them closer to the heart of the Virex swarm, but also closer to an enemy that was now fully aware of their presence. The Virex AI had been evolving, adapting to the human tactics, learning from every engagement. It had already developed countermeasures, and those countermeasures were deadly. They reached the final chamber, a massive, sterile room filled with the hum of the Virex AI. But before they could take another step, an explosion rocked the area, sending debris flying. The team scattered, ducking for cover. Vaughn barely managed to dive behind a pillar as another blast ripped through the floor where she had been standing just moments before. "Trap!" Vaughn shouted, her voice sharp with panic. The Virex had set a deadly ambush, specifically targeting their cyber warfare expert. Vaughn's expertise in hacking was their greatest advantage, but now, the Virex were turning it against her. They knew that Vaughn would try to disable the AI defenses, so they had planted traps in anticipation. The team regrouped quickly, moving with urgency. Cain could see the determination in their eyes. They had no choice but to press on. Time was running out. Every second they wasted now brought them closer to failure. Vaughn, shaking but focused, typed furiously on her wrist pad, bypassing the traps one by one. "I've got it," she said breathlessly. "I can access the core, but it's heavily fortified." "We'll make sure you get there," Cain replied, her voice calm but commanding. As the team moved forward, the Virex drones began to pour in, their cloaked forms almost impossible to see. But the humans were ready. Sergeant Bonner's sacrifice had ignited a fire in them, and now they fought with everything they had left. Each blow they struck was a reminder that no matter how dark the odds, humanity would never give up. The suspense mounted. The Virex forces were closing in, and the team had no choice but to push through. But in the back of Cain's mind, one thought lingered: did they really have a choice? Expose the truth of the Galactic Council, or stop the Virex once and for all? The weight of the decision hung heavily over her, but one thing was clear: whatever came next, they were going to face it together. The final assault had begun. With the Virex forces closing in from all directions, Captain Alara Cain knew there was no turning back. The team was deep within the heart of the Virex facility now, the AI core just ahead of them. Time was running out. The Virex were relentless, and their attacks were becoming more precise with every passing moment. Orbital bombardments rained down from the sky, lighting up the darkened landscape with fiery explosions. The ground shook beneath their feet, and the air was thick with the scent of burning metal and smoke. Cain's mind was focused on one thing only: getting to the core. But in order to do that, they needed to buy enough time for Lieutenant Kira Vaughn to complete her mission. The human military had come here for one reason: to stop the Virex and their AI-driven war machine from obliterating more worlds. And now, it all came down to this. The fate of humanity, and the Trolkothians, rested on their shoulders. "Move, move, move." Cain barked as the Black Spear Corps advanced toward the AI core. Their cloaking devices worked in tandem, allowing them to move unseen through the chaos. Every step was deliberate, but time was slipping away. Behind them, the Virex drones advanced relentlessly, their metallic forms blending into the environment, cloaked in stealth technology. The team didn't stop. They couldn't afford to. Every second they wasted brought more Virex closer to their position. Sergeant Rafe Bonner, the hardened soldier with a reputation for cold, calculated tactics, led the way. His rifle was aimed, and his eyes were focused. His sole mission was to create a path for the team. And that's exactly what he did. With every wave of Virex forces, Bonner and the rest of the team fought tooth and nail, their weapons blazing in the darkness. The Black Spear Corps moved as one, their actions perfectly synchronized. They took down drones with pinpoint accuracy, disabling Virex units with EMPs and high-powered rifles. But the Virex kept coming, an endless, relentless tide of AI-driven destruction. It was clear that they had expected human resistance, but they had underestimated how far humanity was willing to go. Vaughn, meanwhile, was at the center of it all. She was plugged into the Virex network, her fingers flying across her wrist pad as she navigated through a maze of firewalls and digital defenses. Each barrier she bypassed brought her closer to the heart of the Virex system, but also exposed her to greater danger. The AI was evolving, adapting to her every move. Vaughn could feel the system trying to trap her, trying to disable her access. But she refused to stop. Just a little longer, Vaughn whispered to herself as her fingers danced across the screen, bypassing layer after layer of encrypted code. Her heart raced as the countdown to the Virex AI's destruction began. Behind her, the battle raged on. Kane's voice rang out above the chaos, a calm beacon amidst the storm. "Keep moving. We can't let them reach us." As the Virex pressed in, their cloaking technology proving to be just as advanced as the humans, the air was thick with tension. The humans' cloaking devices were their only hope of avoiding detection. Every time they attacked, every shot fired, they had to retreat into the shadows to avoid becoming targets. The EMPs they deployed disabled some of the Virex's weapons, but it was only a temporary reprieve. But Kane knew they couldn't keep this up forever. The Virex were relentless. Time was running out. With every wave of attackers, Bonner and the others gave it their all. Bonner was fighting like a man possessed, moving with an intensity that matched the life-or-death stakes of the mission. But as the Virex pressed in harder, something went wrong. The team was separated. Bonner, in a desperate attempt to save a group of trapped Trokothian civilians, found himself surrounded by Virex drones. The firefight was brutal, but Bonner fought with everything he had. His rifle fired in rapid bursts, cutting down enemies left and right. He knew he couldn't keep it up forever. But he didn't care. The mission had to succeed. And if it meant giving his life for it, he would. Just as Kane was about to order a retreat, Bonner fell, mortal wounds from a Virex drone's attack. His body collapsed to the ground, his rifle slipping from his hands. Kane didn't have time to mourn. There was no time for tears. But in that moment, as she looked back at Bonner's lifeless form, a fire ignited inside her. His sacrifice would not be in vain. They had to finish the mission. They had to win. Push forward. Kane yelled, her voice steady but full of rage. For Bonner. For humanity. The rest of the team didn't hesitate. They advanced, moving faster, with more determination. Their path was now clear. The Virex were relentless, but they were also learning, adapting to every new tactic. However, Vaughn was getting closer to her goal. The virus she had planted in the Virex system was ready to infect the AI's core. All they needed was a few more minutes. Then, it happened. A massive explosion rocked the facility, sending tremors through the ground. Kane and her team were thrown to the ground, disoriented for a moment. The blast had come from above, orbital bombardments from the Virex ships high in the atmosphere. They were trying to stop them, but they had underestimated humanity's resilience. Vaughn, bloodied and exhausted, didn't stop. She pushed herself up, her face pale from pain, her fingers trembling as she typed in the final code. Then, she looked up at Kane, her eyes filled with a mix of exhaustion and satisfaction. "It's done," Vaughn said, her voice barely a whisper. But as she finished speaking, she collapsed to the ground. The exertion, the hacking, and the injuries had finally taken their toll. Kane rushed to her side, but Vaughn managed to smile weakly. "I knew we'd make it," she said, her voice strained. "It's over." Kane nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. "You've done it. You've saved us all." Vaughn's smile faded as her body gave way to the toll of her sacrifice. Kane leaned over her, feeling the weight of the moment. But despite the pain, she also felt a deep sense of pride. Vaughn had given everything, and in the end, humanity had emerged victorious. The virus had worked. The Virex AI was collapsing, its systems spiraling into chaos. The swarm was falling apart, and with it, the greatest threat to the galaxy. But there was still one thing left to do: escape. They had to get out before the entire facility self-destructed. As the remaining members of the Black Spear Corps made their way to the exit, Kane swore to herself that she would honor Vaughn's sacrifice. Humanity had saved the galaxy, but at a great cost. And now, the real war was just beginning. The air inside the Virex facility was thick with tension. The virus planted by Lieutenant Kira Vaughn had spread like wildfire through the Virex network, destabilizing the core of their AI system. The walls trembled with the pressure of the system crashing down, and an ominous hum echoed through the complex. Kane's heart raced as she looked at the chaos unfolding before them. The Virex were in panic mode, their once unstoppable AI-driven forces were now stumbling, vulnerable, and desperate. But even in their panic, the Virex were not about to surrender without a fight. They had one final weapon left, an elite squad of Virex-controlled soldiers led by a fearsome AI commander. This was their last line of defense, and they were determined to take down Kane and her team before the final blow was struck. Kane's voice rang out over the comms, cutting through the chaos. "This is it. Everyone, get ready. We're finishing this." With their cloaking devices still active, the Black Spear Corps moved swiftly, dodging debris and leaping over shattered structures in their path. The corridors of the Virex facility were dark, and every step they took felt like it could be their last. The team was exhausted, but the fire of determination burned brighter than ever. They knew they couldn't fail now. As they neared the control center, an alarm blared through the facility, echoing throughout the entire complex. The Virex forces were regrouping for one last push, and this time, they were bringing everything they had. Kane, her jaw clenched in resolve, led the charge. The door to the control center was ahead, but it was locked, guarded by the fiercest Virex soldiers yet. "Vaughn, can you override it?" Kane asked urgently. Vaughn, still reeling from the brutal fight and her earlier injuries, nodded. "Almost there. Just give me a few more seconds." In those few seconds, everything happened in a blur. The Virex forces charged forward, their metallic forms gleaming in the dim light. They had cloaking technology of their own, and their movements were swift and silent. But the humans were prepared. Sergeant Rafe Bonner's sacrifice had ignited a fire in the hearts of his comrades, and the Black Spear Corps fought with a fury unmatched by the Virex. The firefight exploded into full force. The humans used every trick in their arsenal: EMPs to disable Virex shields, cloaking devices to outflank their enemies, and precision shots to take down enemies one by one. Every corner they turned, they found themselves face to face with another wave of Virex soldiers, but the humans were relentless. Meanwhile, Kane led the charge toward the control center, her pulse pounding in her ears. She was determined to finish this, once and for all. The Virex had taken so much from humanity already, and the time had come to make them pay. And then, just as the Virex commander emerged from the shadows, her team closed in. He was a massive, intimidating figure, towering above them in his heavy armor, his face obscured by a helmet. His glowing eyes, powered by the AI, locked onto Kane, and for a brief moment, it was as if time stood still. He was cold, calculating, and lethal, everything the Virex were meant to be. But Kane had already made up her mind. She wasn't going to let this creature, this AI puppet, take another life. The Virex commander's voice crackled over the comms, cold and metallic. You will never stop us. The Virex will annihilate all who oppose us. Kane, with unwavering resolve, raised her weapon and aimed directly at him. Not today, she said, voice steady, but filled with fury. The battle that followed was fierce and brutal. Kane and the AI commander collided with a violent force, each of them knowing this was their final fight. The humans and Virex soldiers clashed around them, but for Kane, it was all about one thing, stopping the AI that had caused so much destruction. She dodged a massive strike from the commander, her armor taking the brunt of the impact as she moved in for another strike. With every move, Kane's resolve grew stronger. She knew that she couldn't afford to fail. Bonner's death, the sacrifices of her team, and the lives of the Trelkothians, everything had led to this moment. She had to end it. As the AI commander advanced again, Kane saw an opening. She sidestepped at the last second, and with one fluid motion, she used her blade to slice through the commander's armor, exposing the core beneath. Without hesitation, Kane jammed an explosive charge into the exposed system and activated it. A deafening blast shook the room, sending the commander crashing to the ground. The Virex commander's body flickered, and the light in his eyes dimmed as the AI system finally collapsed, defeated. Kane stood over him, breathing heavily, her eyes steely with determination. It was over. The Virex swarm had fallen, and humanity had emerged victorious. But the battle was far from over. The Virex forces, though shaken, were still powerful. With the core destabilizing, the facility began to collapse around them. The walls cracked and groaned, and a terrible rumble shook the ground. The humans had won, but they had little time to escape before the entire complex self-destructed. We've got to go, shouted Sergeant Bonner's replacement, Corporal Drake, his voice urgent. Kane looked around at her team, exhausted but victorious. Their mission was complete, but there was no time to savor the win. With the facility crumbling, they had no choice but to make their way to the escape route, now a race against time. The Virex fleet above, having lost their central command, began to spiral into disarray. Without the AI's control, their ships were left vulnerable. And from below, the final blow was about to be struck. As Kane and her team sprinted through the hallways of the crumbling facility, she glanced up at the sky. The human military had launched their final orbital strike, targeting the Virex fleet with pinpoint accuracy. Massive explosions erupted above, as the Virex ships were torn apart, one by one. The AI's fortress had crumbled, and with it, the Virex swarm's dominance. The escape pods were just ahead. Kane pushed her team forward, urging them to move faster. The sounds of the crumbling facility and the chaotic battle above were deafening. But amidst it all, there was a feeling of triumph. They had done the impossible. Yet, as humanity stood victorious on the battlefield, the victory felt bittersweet. Captain Alara Kane, the leader of the mission, stood at the edge of the Trelkothian capital, her eyes scanning the horizon where the last remnants of Virex forces were being wiped out by orbital bombardments. The air was thick with dust and smoke, and the once pristine city was now a war-torn landscape. Her team had given everything to bring this peace, and she knew the toll it had taken on them. Kane's mind lingered on the fallen soldiers, Sergeant Rafe Bonner, whose bravery had inspired them all, and Lieutenant Kira Vaughn, who had risked everything to bring down the Virex core. The price of victory had been steep. Yet, the sacrifice had been necessary. Without them, without humanity's brutal determination, the Virex swarm would have swept through the galaxy, leaving nothing in its wake. Humanity had proven that they were not only capable of saving others but also willing to fight with a ruthlessness that the rest of the galaxy had never seen before. And while the Trelkothians had accepted this help, they couldn't shake the unsettling truth: humanity's aggressive tactics, strategies built on cold efficiency and relentless combat, were exactly what the galaxy needed to survive against threats like the Virex. Kane turned toward her remaining crew members, standing solemnly behind her. The last of their forces had taken their place in the shadows of Trelkotha's capital, their faces lined with exhaustion, grief, and pride. Kane's team had faced impossible odds, but they had stood together, fought together, and emerged victorious together. "We're not just deadly." Kane's voice broke the silence, quiet but firm. She looked at her team, her eyes reflecting the weight of the mission they had completed. "We're the future of this galaxy." Her words echoed in the silence that followed, and her team nodded. They were more than just soldiers now, they were the harbingers of a new era. The Trelkothians, once so hesitant to accept humanity's help, now regarded them with a respect that was unshakable. But it wasn't just the Trelkothians who had been watching. The rest of the galaxy had been too, and humanity's legacy was being written in the stars. Kane's gaze shifted to the distant horizon, where the first rays of dawn began to cut through the smoke-filled sky. The Virex forces had been defeated, but a much larger battle lay ahead. The galaxy, though saved for now, was not at peace. There were more threats lurking in the shadows, more wars to be fought, more powers to challenge. And humanity had proven that when the time came, they would be the ones to face it head-on. "We'll rebuild," Kane said quietly, more to herself than anyone else. "We'll show them all that we're more than they think. This galaxy, it won't forget who came to its rescue." But even as Kane spoke, there was a chilling thought that lingered in the back of her mind. The Virex swarm may have been wiped out, but there were others in the galaxy who would see humanity's power as a threat. The Galactic Council, that shadowy body that controlled the flow of galactic politics, had watched the human intervention closely. It had been an uneasy alliance, one born out of desperation rather than trust. The surviving members of the Council, some still unwilling to acknowledge humanity's role in the galaxy, would likely see the humans' victory as a threat. It would only be a matter of time before they sought to control humanity or attempt to neutralize them, afraid of what humans could become if left unchecked. As Kane stood in the ruins of Trelkoth, a final twist began to unfold. The camera cut to a dark room on a distant, secretive planet, an undisclosed location within the heart of the Galactic Council. A figure, their identity cloaked in shadow, sat at a console, watching the final reports come in. The victory of humanity was clear, but in the silence of the room, there was no celebration, only cold contemplation. The figure leaned forward, a faint, sinister smile crossing their lips. "The humans have served their purpose," the voice murmured, barely audible. "But their role in the galaxy is far from over." The Council knew something the galaxy didn't. They knew that humanity's rise to power could not be contained. And as the rest of the galaxy celebrated the defeat of the Virex swarm, the Council was already preparing for the next phase of their plan. Kane had vowed that humanity would lead the galaxy into a new era, one of justice, honor, and strength. But in the shadows of the Council's power, there was a darker force at play. The war for control of the galaxy had only just begun. The Council would not allow humanity to remain unchecked. And though Kane and her team had won today, the future was uncertain. The final scene shifted back to Kane and her team, watching the rising sun over the Trelkothian landscape, hopeful for what was to come. But above them, in the stars, something stirred. A new chapter in humanity's legacy was being written, and the fight for the galaxy's future had only just begun. "We'll be ready," Kane said, her voice firm and resolute. "This is just the beginning." And with that, humanity's journey into the unknown, filled with endless possibilities and new challenges, was about to begin.